Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. An impetuous comment by Jitendra Singh, the Minister of State and the PMO, claiming the government has started the process of talks to abrogate Article 370, has deeply disturbed many Kashmiris and created an unwelcome controversy for the government. Even though senior ministers have distanced themselves from this claim, it's undeniable that the BJP manifesto is committed to abrogation, albeit after a debate with all stakeholders. But even that position is considered by some to have potential problems and could create a hornet's nest. In fact, at the heart of the problem lies the fact that many Indians don't realize why Article 370 is such a sensitive issue. They don't know the history that lies behind it, and therefore they don't understand the special nature of the Kashmir state or its accession to India. With me today to explain this complex matter and why even a debate on Article 370 could be sensitive or possibly even dangerous is the former Sadr-e-Riyasat and Governor of Jammu and Kashmir, the son of the Maharaja who acceded the state to India, Dr. Karan Singh. Dr. Singh, let's start with some of the essential facts of history that many people today either have forgotten or simply don't know. In a statement that you issued yesterday, you said that your father had signed Kashmir's instrument of accession to India under unusual circumstances. For those who weren't born at the time, and that's probably the vast majority of India, are those unusual circumstances the fact that his state was at that moment under aggression from Pakistani tribal raiders and virtually in a state of war?
Jammu and Kashmir.
Absolutely.
Yes, it was a very difficult situation at the time. He had not acceded either to India or to Pakistan. We had borders with both of the dominions, as they were called at the time. And then there was this invasion from Pakistan with the tribals. Perhaps we would call them the ancestors of the present of the Taliban, if you like. And before we knew what was happening, they were moving towards the center of the valley. And my father at that time was in a situation where the whole state was going to be overrun. The state forces were fighting bravely, but they were in penny packets, they couldn't hold them back. And therefore, he asked for help from India.
So in a sense, this decision was forced on him by circumstances?
In a way it was. Maybe he would have taken this decision himself later, but at that particular moment, it was forced by the invasion.
So the first thing that makes Kashmir different to every other state in India is that its accession came under forced circumstances. The second thing that makes it different to every other state is whilst all the other states after accession merged with India, Kashmir's relationship with New Delhi was established on a different basis. Was that different basis Article 370?
Yes, you keep calling it Kashmir, you know, Karan.
I'm using it as a short form for Jammu and Kashmir.
It's the wrong thing to do. Many of our problems revolve around the fact that Kashmir is used as
Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, you must use that. It's a multi-regional, multi-ethnic state. But that's important, politically important also. Yes, you see, at that time, after the invasion, then when the United Nations got into the act, there was going to be a plebiscite, if you remember at that time. People have forgotten about the fact that a plebiscite administrator was appointed. Admiral Chester Nimitz of the US Navy was appointed plebiscite administrator. So it was a reality.
And so Article 370 was devised in those circumstances?
Was devised in those circumstances. It couldn't have been a merger like anything else. It was international dispute. The state had been virtually divided into two de facto, and therefore it was a special position.
So Article 370 was a reflection of three things. That there was a plebiscite administrator appointed, there was in fact a promise to carry out a plebiscite, which never happened. The state was also divided into two. There was also a dispute going on. The state was actually under attack from Pakistan. So under those circumstances, the state didn't merge with India. The bond that links Srinagar to Delhi was created as per Article 370.
Yes, and another fact was that in the absence of a plebiscite, a special position in a way was promised to Kashmir.
And Article 370 is the guarantee of that special position.
That is the guarantee of the special position.
Now, in fact, what Article 370 does is to guarantee a certain measure of autonomy to Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes.
And it does it by ensuring that laws passed by Delhi will only be implemented in Jammu and Kashmir if Srinagar agrees to them.
Except for those subjects for which my father acceded.
And the reason that Article 370 guarantees this autonomy is because this is a way of protecting the terms of your father's accession.
In a way, yes. Although it wasn't specifically mentioned. But if you read the whole...
this is what it amounts to.
It amounts to that.
Now, what Article 370 therefore does is it ensures that the relationship between Srinagar and Delhi is different to the relationship between any other state and Delhi.
Yes.
But does that also therefore mean that Kashmir is not, Jammu and Kashmir is not an integral part of India?
No, of course it's an integral part of India. There's no doubt about it, because the instrument of accession that my father signed was exactly the same as all the other princes signed.
It was only the merger that was different.
It was only the merger that did not take place, but it became an integral part. However, let me add, Karan, that an integral part doesn't mean necessarily that every part is going to be treated the same. Lakshadweep could perhaps be treated differently from UP. I gave the example in my article of Hong Kong. One state, two systems. Hong Kong is an integral part of China.
Absolutely.
And yet they've given them a special position.
And let me, for the sake of the audience, just explicate that a little. Hong Kong, when it merged eventually or went back to China and the British left, the Chinese agreed that it would be one country but two systems. Similarly, they did the same thing with Macau. And what you're saying is that the Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir relationship with the rest of India is similar to Hong Kong and Macau's relationship.
Well, not exactly similar, but I'm
it's
giving
along
an
those
example
lines.
that there can be, in large countries, there can be different ways of dealing with different states. There is no Shastric injunction that everything is going to be treated exactly the same.
And the fact that a state is treated differently to other states doesn't mean that state is not an integral part of the country.
Yes, not at all.
That is a wrong conclusion to jump to.
Entirely.
Now, in fact, Article 370 is not the only article in the Constitution that guarantees special provisions or special treatment for states. Articles 371A all the way to I do that.
They do that. So it's not only Kashmir, there are special provisions for tribal areas, as you know, there are special provisions for all sorts of other areas. So it's only because Jammu Kashmir is highly politicized that people think that Article 370 is some kind of a burden that is being placed upon the rest of the country. It's not so.
This is a very important point you're making. It's the politicization of Jammu and Kashmir that makes critics of Article 370 harp on Article 370 as if it's unusual, peculiar, and a threat to India's integrity. The truth is, Article 371A to I, which apply to Nagaland, Assam, Manipur, Mizoram, Andhra Pradesh, Goa, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, those articles are very similar because they give similar provisions and similar protection to other states.
Nobody bothers about them. Nobody knows about them.
Logically, they ought to bother about those as well, or not bother about either.
Yes.
So there's a sense in which people are picking on Article 370.
Yes, understandably, because Jammu Kashmir is high profile.
Now, one other point about Article 370. The measure of autonomy that it seemed to guarantee Jammu and Kashmir in 47 has over the decades been substantially whittled down, has it not?
Yes, it has. It has. There are many things. There was a constitution was made which I signed into law in 1957. That took the process of integration further. Then there were a lot of presidential orders, including a very important one in 1964, where the Prime Minister, as he used to be called, became Chief Minister, and the Sadr-e Riyasat, as I was called, became Governor.
Quite right.
So there were major changes made. It isn't as if it's been inscribed in stone. It's an evolutionary process.
So the second point we're making is that although Article 370, when it was originally devised and put into the Constitution, was intended to protect the autonomy that Kashmir believed was its right because those were the terms of its accession, over the decades, that autonomy has been successively whittled down. And Amitabh Mattu, a former Vice Chancellor of Jammu University, actually says that the autonomy that exists today is but a pale shadow of what it was in 47.
Yes, definitely that is correct. That is correct, but mind you, all this has been done, at least technically, with the consultation and approval of the J&K government.
The point I'm making is that if there is an argument to say that Article 370 has created a unique state, and therefore that's objectionable, that uniqueness is nowhere near as unique as it was in 47. It's much more like the rest of India today.
Yes, that's true.
Now, when Article 370 was created, and this is still there in the Constitution, it was intended to be temporary. In fact, it says so right at the top of Article 370. Are there good reasons today in 2014 for continuing 67 years later with a clause that was intended to be temporary?
Well, you remember the reservation for Harijans was supposed to be 10 years. That answers your question.
But there's two conclusions you can draw from that answer. One, that once the Indian system comes up with a solution, even if it's meant to be temporary, it never has the guts to change it. Things just get set in stone and carry on. And the other conclusion could be that in this instance, and maybe that won't apply to reservations, there's a good reason beyond just laziness for continuing with it. Is there a good reason beyond laziness?
Well, there's a political reason. Let's face it. I've said also, hinted in this, if you recall, that the regions of this is where the regions come in very important. I have to take 2 minutes on this. This is a multi-regional state. There are 5 regions now. 2 Gilgit-Baltistan, so-called northern areas, huge region, very, very strategic, and the Punjabi Muslim belt, which they call AJK, we call POK. Those 2 regions are not under our control. 50% of my father's state is not under our control. Remaining with us, 42,000 square miles, there are 3 clear-cut regions. There's the Kashmir Valley, there's the Jammu region, and there's the Ladakh region. They're very, very different. They have very different.
Why is Article 370's continuation essential to those 3 regions?
It may not be as essential to all the regions. Basically, politically, it's essential to the Kashmir Valley.
So you're saying a very interesting thing. You're saying that the attitude of the 3 regions to Article 370 is different.
Yes.
And therefore, if a debate about abrogating Article 370 were to be thoughtlessly provoked, those 3 regions could fracture or their relationship would be damaged.
Yes, they could be.
So there is.
It could be. You see, they are part of these 3 regions. Frankly, are part of a feudal setup, which my ancestors started.
You could undo that.
If you normally, for example, if there had been the States Reorganization Commission, by now there would have been 3 different regions.
And maybe 3 different states.
And the 3 different states, yes, maybe.
So you're saying a very important thing, Dr. Karan Singh, and I'm repeating it for the audience. You're saying that the 3 regions that comprise Jammu and Kashmir within India today were actually a creation of a feudal setup.
They are the leftovers of a feudal state.
They are the leftovers of a feudal setup. If you undo Article 370, then the relationship that binds them together could also unravel.
Yes.
And you may endanger Jammu and Kashmir and its internal unity as it exists today.
Yes. It could change. I mean, you've endangered the unity of Andhra, they've become 2 states.
And this is a different problem to the one that Kashmiri politicians have brought up, because what they emphasize is not the fracturing of the internal unity of the 3 regions that make up J&K. They talk about fracturing the unity between Srinagar and Delhi. That's another threat, isn't it? That if you
That's a threat, and I think that is totally uncalled for. All talk of secession and statements being made that if 370 goes, Kashmir will go out of India. I don't think those statements are at all warranted. But I must say, there are very strong feelings in Kashmir Valley.
Kashmir Valley sentiment will be badly affected by abrogation.
Because they feel that the plebiscite was offered, that didn't take place. Autonomy was offered, that is being diluted over the years. अब ये last जो है, अगर इसको भी खत्म कर देते हैं तो हमारी position खत्म हो जाती है.
So then there is a real sense in which, even if the threat of secession is unwarranted, but nonetheless sentiment in the valley. And I'm separating the valley from Ladakh and from Jammu. Sentiment in the valley will be deeply upset.
Yes.
And that's the majority population of the state.
Yes.
And therefore, you're running the risk, if you have a thoughtless, careless debate on Article 370, of so deeply offending the valley that you end up alienating the majority population of the state.
Which is why I said, for God's sake, cool down and don't make these absolutist statements.
So there are 2 dangers to a thoughtless debate on Article 370. One, deeply alienating the valley, which is the majority population of the state. And secondly, you could also unravel the thin bonds of unity that bind the 3 regions of the state together. Both are real dangers.
I don't know, the second one is a danger. It could happen in the natural course sometimes.
But you could.
But such a great danger. All the other states disappeared. What happened to the Nizam state? Gulbarga went into Karnataka. Marathwada went into Maharashtra. and the rest, Telangana is now also 2.
The same
So
sort
all
of
these
vociferousness could happen here.
It's not vociferous, it's just a reorganization over time.
What do you say to people who, on the other hand, take the opposite view and say that, look, the problem with 370 is it breeds separation or a sense of separatism because you have a different system, even though it's whittled down from 47?
Really all that different, the system, pretty much the same. I mean, maybe there are differences, maybe every single act of parliament doesn't automatically apply to Jammu and Kashmir. But more or less, I mean, the Supreme Court, the Controller and Auditor General, all the major institutions, the Election Commission, all of those are operative in Jammu and Kashmir.
So this claim that 370 breeds separation or separatism is exaggerated?
It is exaggerated, definitely.
All right. Let's now come to what would happen if the BJP government that's come to power is actually determined to go ahead with abrogation, because although they say that they are interested in a debate with all stakeholders, their manifesto makes it completely clear that they are committed to its abrogation. Those are the precise words, committed to its abrogation. Now, clause 3 of Article 370 makes it absolutely clear that Article 370 cannot be repealed without the concurrence of the Kashmir Constituent Assembly, Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly. But that assembly doesn't exist. What are the dangers in trying to create a new Constituent Assembly so that you can successfully abrogate 370?
I don't think a new Constituent Assembly is really on the cards, because you know, how would you make a new Constituent? I called the old Constituent Assembly into being as in my capacity as regent of the state, and then it came into being. I don't think you can have, but one thing I must
Can I interrupt there?
Yes.
Even if you were to be creative, and sometimes the legal advice that governments get can be very creative, and the government tried to create a new Constituent Assembly, isn't there a danger that a Constituent Assembly, because it is a Constituent Assembly, may take other decisions as well, including a decision to undo accession? That's a risk you run if it's a Constituent Assembly.
I don't, that's why I say I don't think it's the first time I've really heard of the possibility of a new Constituent Assembly.
So going down that route would be unwise.
Answer your question. You see, the whole issue is extremely complex and complicated legally. There's international complications, there's legal complications, there's constitutional complications. Perhaps the legal geniuses may find out some kind of a way of doing it, but it's not going to be easy.
I'm going to put one other legal, in quotes, genius way of doing it to you, but before I do that, I just want to underline one thing. You agree with my assumption that even if they were to take the risky step of creating a new Constituent Assembly to get around the problem of how you abrogate 370, the great danger is a new Constituent Assembly, because it's a Constituent Assembly, may take steps they don't want,
Not
like
only that,
undoing accession.
And may support Article 370.
And may support Article 370.
You know, I think the whole thing is an absurd idea.
Now, what about the possibility that a government may somehow put together a 2/3 majority in Parliament and amend the Constitution to remove the requirement of calling a Constituent
That is,
Assembly?
as I said, that is a constitutional matter. I cannot opine on that. Only the legal luminaries can opine on that. And there are lots of legal luminaries in the new government. But if they do that, and if they do it, then there will be political consequences which will have to be faced.
Amitabh Mattu, who I referred to earlier, the former Vice Chancellor of Jammu University, says that if the government were try to amend to abrogate Article 370, they could find it would be struck down by the Supreme Court on the grounds that Article 370 is deemed to be part of the basic structure.
Well, as I said, I cannot say what the Constituent Assembly, what the Supreme Court will do. I cannot predict that, nor can I predict really that the government will go to the extent of trying to change the entire thing. But that is in the realm of the law. Can they do it? Can they not do it? Is it part of the basic structure? Is it not? Only the Supreme Court can opine.
Let me come to the end of this interview by asking you not questions about Kashmir's history, which is how we began, not questions about the critical nature of Article 370, or even questions about whether it's wise to try and amend it and whether the many ways of amending it are sensible or not. Let me ask you a simple question as a Kashmiri.
I'm not a Kashmiri.
A Jammu and Kashmiri.
I'm a Dogra.
As a Dogra.
See, there you are. That is where you make all the differences.
Let me ask you a simple question.
I'm very close to Kashmir, but I'm a Dogra, not a Kashmiri.
Let me ask you a simple question as the son of the former Maharaja, as the first and only Sadr-e-Riyasat. What advice would you give the BJP government about this issue? They claim two things. One, a commitment to abrogate, but before that they claim a desire for a debate with all stakeholders. Is even a debate so sensitive as to be potentially unwise?
Well, if the Prime Minister wants my advice, I'll give it to him.
But why don't you share it with your countrymen?
In due course, when I give it to him also.
But you shared with your countrymen your opinion of 370, its history. You've opened their eyes to the complexity of the situation. You've opened your eyes to the folly of trying to amend and abrogate. Don't give me the full details of your advice to the Prime Minister, but is a debate on this issue a wise idea?
In a democracy, Karan, you cannot stop a debate, and you should not, because this is a free country. A lot of people can debate a lot of things. So to say that no, you shouldn't debate, I don't think that is accurate. Whether it is wise to start a debate of this nature is a different matter. You don't have to debate everything, but you cannot say don't debate something. So as a citizen of a free country, I will have to say, yes, you can debate whatever you like.
But don't provoke a debate when it's not necessary.
When it's not necessary, or if it is, or do it with extreme caution, extreme sensitivity. Sensitivity, you must remember, there are sensitive emotions involved here. We sitting in Delhi cannot imagine what it is like, what the people in the Kashmir Valley think. I mean, I'm not making a value judgment, but उनके दिल की भी बात है ना, दिल को भी छूना है ना.
I asked you what would be your advice to the government. Let me now ask you what would be your advice to those who were once your father's former subjects. Now they are your fellow citizens, the people of the valley. If a debate were to be started, inadvisable as it may be, what would be your advice to them as that debate happens?
Really, it's not a question of advice, because the moment the debate starts, they will definitely oppose it.
And
all parties will oppose it.
And they will be upset.
They'll be very upset. Look at already the sort of tweets that are coming out.
And this will.
And also you have these tweets. These tweets are from legitimate parties, mind you, National Conference and PDP, Umar and Mehbooba. Think what the Hurriyat and the other and Gilani and those people would do.
So in other words, if you really want to strain the already difficult and tense relationship with the people of the valley, this is a surefire, guaranteed way of doing it.
Well, you could put it that way if you like.
So even though you began by saying, in a democracy you must debate.
You can debate, I said.
You can.
You don't have to debate, but you cannot shut out a debate.
I'm picking up on those words, you don't have to debate. The conclusion we're reaching is, this is one debate that is probably best avoided. That look says yes, doesn't it? That smile and laugh says yes, even though you're not articulating it. Dr. Karan Singh, there's an enigmatic look on your face which I'm going to interpret for the audience. That smile, that laugh is a clear yes, but as a clever politician and a Democrat, you're not going to actually say it up front. My thanks to you for joining me, for helping us understand the complexity of the situation.
I hope people realize a little bit of the complexity of this whole affair.
Well, I hope that having heard you, they get a much better understanding of the complexity, and hopefully that will lead them to the realization. And there we end this particular episode. We'll be back next week, Monday, with another whole week of To The Point. But for tonight, goodbye, good night, and have a good weekend.